This is what you will need to make a drop stitch Cowl Sandra. 1 ball of Charisma yarn by Loops and Threads of any color that you choose. I particularly like this color. It's called Bright Pop, number J36. Then you will need some additional yarn that you will use for provisional cast on to begin your knitting project. I'm using the Lily's Cotton, Sugar and Cream, but you can use any yarn as long as it's not fuzzy and it's easy to unravel at the end when you release the stitches that you cast it on using the provisional cast on with this yarn at the beginning of knitting. Then you will need the single point knitting needles, size 10.5. You will need a crocheting hook for the cast on. I'm using size I9, 5.5 millimeters. This is the largest size crocheting hook I have in my collection, but you can use a larger hook. Certainly this yarn calls for US size 11 or 8 millimeter crocheting hook, so you can use a larger hook as well. Then you will need some scissors to trim off the ends of the yarn, and then you will need a tapestry needle to finish the project using a Kitchener stitch so that our cowl turns out at the end without visible seams. So right now I'm going to show you how to do the provisional cast on, and so I will remove the tools that we don't need and the yarn for now. So we will start with the additional yarn, or you can call it the scrap yarn, and the crocheting hook. So the main pattern of this cowl counts a total of 19 stitches. We will need to provisionally cast on these 19 stitches. In order to do that, first we will crochet a chain out of this additional yarn, and the chain will have a little more than 19 stitches, so we can comfortably cast on the main yarn onto this provisional chain. So first you need to make a loop. You can make it with a crocheting hook like that, the first loop, or you can make it with your hands, whichever you're more comfortable with. So you just twist it like that and then pull a loop like that. And then you crochet, well, I said 19, so let's make it 25. And make it loosely. We need loose chain so we can then cast on our main yarn, because it's a thicker yarn, so we can cast it on comfortably. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on. So make it 25, and I'll meet you there. So once you've finished casting on the number of stitches that you need for the pattern, you can pull out the last stitch and make it hang like that, or you can fasten it and trim it, but I'm not gonna do it because I will be reusing this yarn later on. And so you will see this chain that you made. In front it looks like a chain, and on the back it looks like a purl knitting with little bumps here. These will be the bumps into which we will be casting on the main yarn. Why we need to do that is that we want, with the provisional cast on, to make sure that all the main yarn stitches remain open so that we can then connect them together with the stitches of the finishing row of the cowl with the seamless stitch called Kitchener stitch, and I'll show you how to do it later. So put your chain down, take your yarn, main yarn, and find the end of this yarn, and then start casting on into the crochet chain. And this is why we needed to make it loosely, so that we can easily find those bumps on the back of the chain. And so we're gonna we're gonna actually stitch, like pull out the main yarn and cast through those bumps. We're gonna cast on the main yarn, and we're gonna cast on a total number of stitches that are needed for knitting the cowl as according to the pattern. So we're gonna cast on just like that. You can do it with a crocheting hook, but since we crocheted the chain rather loosely, you can do it with a knitting needle just as easily. And make sure you don't do it tight, just do it very loosely, because this pattern that we will be using, it will be not a very high tension pattern. It rather will be like a loose drop stitch pattern to showcase the beauty of the yarn. So that's how we go. Again, we do it into the bumps on the end, on the other end of the chain, on the reverse side, not on this side, but on this side. We'll find those bumps. They're easy to see, and we just keep casting on our stitches so they look like this on the needle. You don't have to fasten this end of the yarn. You can fasten it at the end of the project when we connect the beginning and the end of the cowl together. So you can just, if it gets loose, you can just tighten up a little, but you don't need to tie a knot on it right now. So keep casting on the stitches, and I will meet you for the main drop stitch pattern. So I casted on all of the stitches that we need for this cowl, and so if you did it right, you can see that once you turn it towards you will see that chain that we had just crocheted for the provisional cast on, and you had cast on the main thread into the back of that chain. And so if you did it right, this is what you should see. If you don't see the chain, it means that you had missed the bump somewhere and cast it into the, pulled the main thread, main yarn into the front of the chain, and then you'll need, in this case, you will need to redo that. So why we need this, here's our last stitch in the crochet chain. So when we need to release these stitches and open them up for the seamless finish, we will just simply pull this thread loose and loosen up, and it's gonna unravel, and so all this waste thread will be gone and the main yarn stitches will become open. But for now we will keep it like this. And so to start knitting the cowl, we will make the first row in the knit stitches and then the second row in the purl. So it's a stockinette stitch, just the usual traditional stockinette stitch. And so as I said in the pattern, we will be slipping, always slipping the first stitch so that we always have the even edge along the edges, and we will be always purling the last stitch. So the first row we're gonna knit, and we're gonna also knit very loosely I don't know if you can hear my cat on the background, but she likes to be very vocal. So you can see some of the videos on my channel. You can see that cat in some of the videos. So if you're curious, so we're gonna just knit the first row. Slipping the first stitch and purling the last stitch. And doing it very loosely. And you can see how this yarn starts changing colors already, and it's really pretty. From pink it becomes red, and then it goes into orange. So just keep knitting until the very last stitch. And if it becomes loose again, you just tighten it up. So like that. And then purl the last stitch, just like that. And then the next row, we're gonna purl all of the stitches, except we're gonna slip the first stitch. So slip it as if a purl, and then purl all other stitches very loosely. Make sure you don't do it tightly, because we need to make sure that this pattern is not tight. It needs to be very airy and very loose, so we can see the beauty of the yarn. And so you purl to the end, including the last stitch, and I'll meet you for the drop stitch pattern. So we made 2 rows of the stockinette stitch. We knitted the first row and then we purled the second row. Now we're going to start the drop stitch pattern. For this pattern, we're going to knit the first and the second row. Again, as always, we're going to slip the first stitch and we're going to purl the last stitch in every row. So we're going to knit the first row of the pattern and we're going to knit the second row. So it's kind of like a garter stitch. Once you've knitted the first and knitted the second row of the drop stitch pattern, I will meet you there. So we're at the end of the second row of the drop stitch pattern, and so the second row we were knitting, so we knit the last stitch, and the edge stitch we always purl, so we purl the last edge stitch. Turn over. The third row, this is where we will be doing the yarn overs. So slip the first stitch, then knit 1, double yarn over, and I'll show you again. So you wrap your knitting needle twice, once and twice, and that's what counts as a double yarn over. You can do it this way, or you can do it this way, the way I do it, and it doesn't matter, it's just the way I'm comfortable doing and I'm used to doing this way. So again, double yarn over, knit 1, double yarn over, knit 1, and I'll show you the entire row, so just follow me. Double yarn over, knit 1, double yarn over, knit 1, double yarn over, knit 1, and don't make it tight, make sure you just keep doing it loosely. Double yarn over, knit one, 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 and keep doing it until you have 2 stitches remaining. Knit one, double yarn over, knit one, and you'll have a lot of yarn on the working needle, but that's the way it's supposed to be with all of those double yarn overs. And then the last double yarn over, knit one. So after this stitch, you don't do the yarn over, you just do the edge stitch, and you always purl it, just like I showed you. Turn over, and this is row 4, the last row. So altogether this drop stitch pattern has 4 rows. So the last row, we slip the first stitch like we always do, that's the first edge stitch, and then we knit, and then we drop off the double yarn overs, just drop them off loosely, and then knit next stitch. So the stitches that we knitted in the previous row, we knit them here as well, and we drop the yarn overs, just drop it off the needle. And then I'll show you at the end what the way it's gonna look like. So this is where the pattern will start showing. Knit the next stitch, drop the yarn overs. Knit the next stitch, drop the yarn overs. Knit the next stitch, and don't be afraid. I mean, it's gonna look messy, of course, to you first. Then once you start just pulling it, the yarn like that, you're gonna see the pattern starts coming out. So you see where the yarn overs are, just don't be afraid, just drop them off, and then knit the next stitch, drop them off, knit the next stitch, drop the yarn overs off, knit the next stitch, drop them off, and I'll show you to the very end of the row so you know how it ends. So again, yarn overs, dropping them off, knitting the next stitch, dropping off, knitting the next stitch, and keep doing it to the end of the row. Again, we're almost at the end, so the last yarn overs, dropping them off, knitting the last stitch, and the edge stitch we always purl. Always purl. Any row, always purl the edge stitch at the end, and always slip it at the beginning. So this is what drop stitches pattern looks like. And so these are the 4 rows. We're gonna turn it this way. And we're gonna keep repeating these 4 rows until the very end. All right, so here's the last row of the drop stitch pattern repeats that I have been repeating to produce the main body of the cowl. And as you see, it turns out really pretty. With all the color changes in the Charisma yarn. So it's airy, it's fluffy, it's exactly how I wanted it. It's not dense and it feels really squishy to the touch. So here is row 4 of the drop stitch pattern on my working needle. And so I have yarn remaining that equals about 4 lengths of the row of the width of the yarn, of the width of the cowl. And I already use a tapestry needle for producing the kitchenaire stitch at the end. So I already loaded the yarn into the tapestry needle. And so I will set it aside, and then I will find my provisional cast on that I made at the beginning of the project. And here is the end of the chain. And so to release, now I need to release these stitches on the second needle, onto the second needle. And so what I'm gonna do is, I'm not gonna release all the stitches right away. You see how these stitches look like? This is the stitches that will be going onto this needle once the scrap yarn is gone. But I will be doing it gradually so I don't lose stitches if I release it right away. So here's how you do it. It's very simple. You just pull the end of this scrap yarn, and as you see, it gets unraveled very easily. And then you just take the stitches that get released and you just put it onto the second needle. So as I said, the first needle is still at the end of the cowl, and the second needle is going into the release stitches of the provisional cast on. So make sure though you start with this end here, so that when you have put all these stitches from the beginning into the needle, these needles, the single points face each other, not like that, but like that, so that the top points are aligned with each other, because we will be then performing a kitchenaire stitch using these two needles. So and the tapestry needle. So again, let's keep releasing the stitches. I'll show you of the provisional cast on. I'll show you a little bit more how I do it. So just keep unraveling and putting them on the yarn, on the needle. And at the end, once you released all of them, you should have the same number of stitches as you have at the end of your knitting on the first needle. And in this particular cowl, we have a total of 19 stitches. So maybe I'll do it till the very end so you see how it gets released really easily. Like that. And finally, the last stitch, be very careful. Don't drop it, just you can put it like that. So it's gonna look just like that. The last stitch is not gonna look the same as all the other stitches, so it's gonna look like that. So let's count. 5, 10, 15, and so all right. So we got 18. So let's see. Maybe we're missing one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So yeah. So then, if you have less than 1, then just put another one like that, so you'll have the 19th here. So you see how we did it here like that, then add another one just like that, because obviously you're looking at the stitches that are upside down from the way you were knitting them. So they get shifted by half a stitch. So you just add another one just like that. So now we're gonna do the grafting, or the seamless finish of the cowl, and I will show you how to do that, and then we will weave in the ends and complete the project. So I remove the waste yarn or the scrap yarn, you no longer need it, but good thing that we didn't trim it off. You can keep reusing it. And you just unravel the chain and that's it. You have your yarn back the way it was. So closing the cowl with the Kitchener stitch is probably the most difficult part of this project, because the Kitchener stitch is a little tricky. So what I normally do is I find online an image of a Kitchener stitch that is easy to follow, and then I try and replicate the steps and the movement of the yarn from one loop to another, from the top knitting needle to the bottom knitting needle stitches. And so the main point of the Kitchener stitch is to make it replicate the stockinette stitch, the knitted rather than purled stitches. You can see I started doing it, and you can see it easily because the top needle stitches are pink, and the Kitchener stitch yarn is red, so you can see the difference, and you can see where this Kitchener stitch is actually going from one loop to another. So as I said, I use the tapestry needle to perform the stitch, and usually I use an image that I find online to kind of follow the movement of the yarn. And so it just you can see how the yarn forms V-like stitches here, and it goes from top to bottom, forming the V-like stitches. So I will try and show you a couple of stitches, a few stitches of Kitchener stitch now. So my yarn is inside of the bottom stitch now, as you can see here, and it needs to go from the bottom stitch, it needs to go to the preceding top stitch, from top down, and then you take off the next stitch from the top needle in a way that it faces like a knitted stitch, and then go inside from bottom up, pull out the yarn. So it should look like that. Now find the bottom stitch here, and then go inside the bottom stitch from top down, and then release the next stitch and go into the next stitch from bottom up and pull out the yarn. So it's going to be like that. So you see how this shaped another V-like stitch. So now from this stitch go to the preceding top stitch from top down, and then release the next top stitch and go from bottom up. Pull out the yarn. So what this did is your stitches are gonna look just like that. So you see how this goes like a V, goes up and then goes here. You see in the preceding stitch it goes down like that. So again, let's try again and repeat again. So from top stitch it goes down to the stitch on the bottom, from top down, and then you release the next stitch and it goes from bottom up. Pull out. And make sure you don't tighten the yarn, because it needs to be, the tension needs to be about the same tension as you had on the main body of the yarn, of the cowl. So don't tighten, don't do it too tight. So again, going from bottom stitch back to the top preceding stitch, going from top down, and then releasing the next top stitch and going from bottom up. Pull out. It's gonna look like that. And then going, don't lose these bottom stitches because they're easy to lose, because the preceding row was like a garter stitch. It was the last row in the drop stitch pattern. So then again, going from into the bottom stitch from top down, and then releasing the next bottom stitch from bottom up. Pull out. And it's gonna look like that. So keep going like this until the very end, and then weave in the ends, and then we will look at the finished cowl at the end of this tutorial. So here I am at the end of the kitchenaire stitch. Let me show you what it looks like. This is the red row, the red yarn row immediately under the pink row. So this is my kitchenaire stitch. As I said, don't tighten it. Don't tighten the, try not to tighten the yarn as you perform the kitchenaire stitch. And so here's my last loop, my last stitch on the bottom row, and I finished all the stitches on the top row. So what I'm gonna do now is release this last stitch and put the yarn through it to finish my kitchenaire stitch row. So this is the end, and then all I have to do now is just to weave in the ends. And first, of course, we need to fasten to fasten this kitchenaire stitch row. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull the yarn through just like that. So we need to it creates like an extra loop on the edge, and then so what we gotta do is here we're probably gonna tie a knot between the beginning yarn and the ending yarn end. And as you see, I've used up the entire bowl of the charisma yarn for this, so let's do it this way here. Oops. Not a good move. So if this end goes this way, we'll try and go this way. Don't tighten it again, just try and make keep the tension a little loose. And so now I'm gonna tighten the knot here. You don't have to do it this way, you can do it any other way you like. And so this is going to be, we're gonna hide weaving the ends anyway, but let's tie the knot so it doesn't get unraveled as you wear the cowl. So here's what, once you've tied the knot, we're gonna try and find the place where we can weave in the red yarn. So let's try and find the place where there is red yarn, so it's not as noticeable. And so what you do is just you weave in the ends like that, and just hide the yarn best way you can between the stitches and moving towards the red yarn. Hope you can see it here. So I'm gonna do it just like that. And here. And I like weaving in longer ends, so it's you know, not easy to unravel by accident when you wear it. So you just do like that. And just pull it through like that, and then just pull it a little bit, loosen it up, so it just, you see this end here, it's almost unnoticeable. So this is, we've weaved in one end, and now we're going to weave in the other end the same way. So I'm going to put it into the tapestry needle, and it's important that they have wide opening for the yarn, so sometimes it's a little tricky, but do your best. And you're going to be done with the project in no time, and you're going to have a pretty cowl to wear in the cold weather. And it's very colorful. And so let's, for this one, let's find the pink yarn, which probably is going to be here, section where we're gonna hide this end, the pink end. So just pull it through the stitches here, just like that. And then just keep weaving until you get to the pink section. And try and hide it the best way you can. But don't tighten it up too much. So probably here with some pink. And if you lost the yarn, it's okay, you can use a crocheting hook. If you lost it from the needle, you can use crocheting hook just to hide the ends. Here's another end that we weaved in. So this one we can weave in this way, using the hook. And I can't wait to show you the completed project, because that's what we work for, right? And here's maybe one more. And voila. And loosen up so you don't see it. So it's pretty much as far as weaving in the ends and finishing. And so now we can see that there's no seam. This is a very neat finish with the kitchener stitch, and it looks just like the rest of the body of the cowl. So if you're not comfortable, and if you're new to the kitchener stitch and you don't have time to do that, it's fine just to bind it off in a regular way and just then sew it together with a needle. You'll have a little seam. It can be on the back of the cowl, so it's not a big deal. But of course, kitchener stitch makes it look very professional and neatly done. And so this completes our video tutorial for this wonderful cowl made out of Charisma yarn by Loops and Threads, the color Bright Pop. And at the end of this video, I'll show you what it looks like on a mannequin. Thank you for watching.